بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. Before we discuss the issue of the return of Isa alayhi salam, the first thing we should talk about is the appearance of someone called the Mahdi. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us in many hadith, these hadith in meaning reaching tawatur, meaning that there are so many that it is without doubt the Prophet ﷺ informed of it, that before the Day of Judgment, as mentioned in the hadith in Musnad of Imam Ahmed, an individual will appear whose name will be the same like the Prophet's name, and his father's name will be the same as the Prophet's father's name. So in other words, his name will be Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us in a hadith in Abu Dawood that this person is from the descendants of Fatima. And indeed, the Prophet ﷺ even tells us his physical characteristics. He tells us that he will have a receding foreline, and that his nose will be thin and will be crooked and coming to a point. And likewise, that the Prophet ﷺ informs us how he will appear. That he will come in a time when there will be much injustice, much tyranny on earth. And there will be many earthquakes. And there will be little rain. And also the Prophet ﷺ tells us that he will appear during a time of civil war and commotion between the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said 3 sons of a Khalifa will fight at the death of a Khalifa. So there will be a Khalifa, a ruler of the Muslims who will die, and 3 of his sons will then fight. And so there will be civil war and turmoil between the Muslims. And so this young man, whose name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, will come from Medina, fleeing this turmoil, and come to Mecca. When he arrives in Mecca, the people will give him bay'ah. They will give him bay'ah between the black stone and between the station of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And when the people give him bay'ah, the people will not recognize him to be the Mahdi until an army comes from Syria to attack him. And when they approach Medina, the ground below them will open up and will swallow them. When the people see this, they will know this is the Mahdi. And so then the righteous people of Iraq and the righteous people of Syria will come to Mecca and they will give him bay'ah. Indeed, in that one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that even if you were to come to him crawling, you should do so. And he is, unlike what many Muslims think, all he is a righteous Muslim, a good leader. In fact, one hadith tells us in Imam Ahmed's Musnad that Allah will rectify him in a night. In other words, before Allah rectifies him, he will not be that pious, he will not be that capable of a leader, but in one night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inspire him to repent and strengthen him so that he will be a righteous leader. And such that he will fill the earth, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, with justice as it was filled with tyranny and injustice. And both the inhabitants of heaven, meaning the angels, and the inhabitants of earth will be pleased with him. And he will divide money fairly between people. So much so that people will not have a need to take money. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us that during his time, Allah will let the rain come frequently. And the earth will produce its produce. And there will be many animals. And this ummah will become numerous in numbers. And that he will lead us for 7, 8, or 9 years. So during his time, we find a revival of Islam. And we find justice. And we find, distribution of wealth accordingly. And he rules the Muslims by the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But also during his time is when the beginning of the great signs showing the approach of the hour occur. In terms of the great battles that this ummah will face. And that is that during his time, the Rum, which means literally the Romans, but is a word that the Arabs use for the Europeans, will have an enemy. And this enemy will be such that they will be unable to defeat this enemy by themselves. So they will come to the Muslims and seek from the Muslims to join them in order to assist them in fighting this common enemy. So the Prophet ﷺ says that there will be a true peace between the Muslims and the Christians, the Europeans during that time. Meaning whenever, besides this time, there is never a true peace between the Muslims and Christians. And that is why there is not a single decade, except that the Muslims and the Christians are somewhere in the world fighting, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes, maybe Muslims in one area of the world are not fighting the Christians, but we're in a perpetual war with these people. And we've seen the latest wars just a few months ago in Kosovo. This ummah is in constant conflict with these people. But however, this time, because they will have a need, they will make a true peace with the Muslims. And so the Muslims, with them, will fight this enemy, and the Muslims will defeat them with them. But then, when the Muslims are retiring back to Syria, one Christian will say, the cross gave us victory. And so a Muslim, upon hearing that, will become angered. So he will kill him. And then the Christians will just kill that contingent of Muslims. And they will use this as an excuse to break the peace treaty. And so the Prophet ﷺ tells us the Christians will then come with a force of almost 1 million men. They will come with under 80 banners, 80 contingents, each one with 12,000 soldiers. And the Prophet ﷺ even told us where they would land. That they would land in a city near a city called Halab, which is Aleppo in English, at 2 hills called Al-A'maq or Dabiq. So we even know where they're going to appear at. And they will come and attack the Muslims. They will say to the Muslims, they will try to do this typical act of theirs of divide and conquer. So they will tell the Muslims of Arabia, we have no quarrel with you. Our quarrel is with the Syrians, the people of Sham. And so they will begin to fight them. And in fact, they will, at first, during the battle, be victorious. And they will push the Muslims until the Muslims are only in Medina. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the furthest outpost of the Muslims will be at Khaybar, near Khaybar, just a few miles outside of Medina. And when the Islamic world sees that the Christians are about to take Medina, a great outpouring will occur. And so even the Bedouins will come out. The Prophet ﷺ said, this ummah will be given victory by 12,000 from Aden, from Yemen, will come because the Muslims will see this. And so the Muslims will push them back until finally they will defeat the Christians in Syria. And the Muslims will then pursue the battle and take Constantinople. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that they will open Constantinople by takbir and tahleel. By saying Allahu Akbar and La ilaha illallah, the walls around Constantinople will crash down and the Muslims will enter into that city. Until finally the Muslims will go into Europe and take Rome. And this battle is what the Christians refer to as Armageddon. This is what the Christians refer to as Armageddon, and to which they're preparing for, and which the Christian fundamentalists are trying to incite the Christian populace in America and in Europe and so forth to prepare for. However, they think, according to their scriptures, that they will throw nuclear bombs upon the Muslims and they will kill us all and so forth. But that's not what's going to happen, because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ very clearly show us that when these battles occur, people will be using horses and swords. So it means the technology which we are now familiar with will somehow disappear. And we'll go back to more traditional and primitive ways of fighting. Now, after this battle will occur, and the Muslims are congregated in this holy land, the Antichrist will appear, a Dajjal. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us many ahadith regarding a Dajjal. He tells us that he's a young man, that he's white, that he's short, that his hair is very curly and he has much hair on his head, that he has a receding foreline, that he's wide-chested, and very importantly, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that he's blind in the right eye. His right eye is neither bulging nor swollen, sunken into his head. And upon his left eye is like a growth coming from his eyebrow, covering that left eye. And between his eyes is written Kafara, Kafir. That every person, every believer will be able to read that, even if he's literate or illiterate. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that he will not have children, but that he will be sterile. The Prophet ﷺ even tells us that he will be crooked in his back. And that is the reason why the Prophet ﷺ gave us all these details, is to prepare us for this. Because a Dajjal will appear in this ummah. And we will be the ones who fight him. And this is the king of the Jews, who the Jews are waiting for. You see, the Jews were promised in their scriptures that a Messiah will appear between them. And when that Messiah appeared, Jesus the son of Mary, what did they do? They disbelieved in him. And they rejected him. And they called him a sorcerer. And they called him a bastard. This is what the Jews said. And they tried to kill him. And they tried to crucify him. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they neither killed him nor crucified him. And so when the true Messiah appeared upon them, they disbelieved in him. And so what they are waiting for is this false Messiah, this Antichrist, a Dajjal, who will be the greatest tribulation between now and the Day of Judgment. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ commanded us in every single prayer to seek refuge with Allah from him. Why? Why would the Prophet ﷺ tell us to seek refuge from an individual who the Prophet ﷺ knew was not going to appear until the end of time? I mean, now, since the Prophet ﷺ's death has been 1400 and some odd years. And yet the Prophet ﷺ had told his ummah to seek refuge in him, because it is the greatest fitna, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, from the time of Adam until the Day of Judgment. Indeed, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that even the previous messengers all warned against the Antichrist, that the Prophet Nuh, the messenger Nuh, alayhi salam, the first messenger sent to humanity, warned his people about the Antichrist. Imagine that. We know Jesus was about 2,000 years ago, alayhi salam, and Moses was about 5,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, and Ibrahim was about 5,000 years ago. How long ago was Nuh, alayhi salam? Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Nuh, alayhi salam, to warn his ummah about the Antichrist. Indeed, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that from the signs that showing his closeness in his appearance, that people will stop warning about him on the mimbars, on the pulpits. And I asked the brothers, when was the last time you heard a khutbah regarding a Dajjal? This is one of the signs of his close appearance. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that before the years of his appearance will be years of much confusion, of falsity, deception, years of deception, in which the truthful person will be considered a liar, and the liar will be considered a truthful person. The trustworthy person will be considered untrustworthy, and the untrustworthy person will be considered trustworthy. And in those years, the Ruwaybidah will speak. Ruwaybidah in the Arabic language means that small sheep. You know, like there's a flock of sheep, there's a newborn sheep. So they asked the Prophet ﷺ, what is the Ruwaybidah? The Prophet ﷺ said, it is an insignificant man talking about the affairs of everyone. And how much so do we find that today? We find insignificant people, people who are ignorant, people who know nothing, stand up and tell us that the ummah should be doing this or the ummah should be doing that we should follow them, preaching to this and that. These are all signs that the Dajjal's time has appeared, or come close to appear. And likewise, the Prophet ﷺ even tells us the city in which his affair will first become apparent. That is the city of Isfahan. And the Prophet ﷺ even tells us the neighborhood. It is the neighborhood of Yahudiya. And that he will come. And the Prophet ﷺ even tells us the first water he will drink from the lands of the Arabs. That is the area of Safwan. And Safwan is south of Basra, near Kuwait, where they had the peace treaty after the Gulf War. That's where, there he will drink his first water in the lands of the Arabs. That's the first land of the Arabs he will enter into. And that he will come between Syria and Iraq, spreading evil and spreading mischief on both sides, seeking to come to Medina. But the angels will not permit him, because he will go to every single land on earth he will pass through, except for Mecca and Medina, because he will be guarded by angels which will prevent him from coming through. And the Prophet ﷺ even told us of his fitna, that with the Dajjal he will have with him paradise and hellfire. And so when people see his paradise, he will have a river of flowing water and a river of fire. Prophet ﷺ says that you should take from the river of fire, not from the river of flowing water. And he will call himself Allah, and the people will believe him. He will come across a land which is a desert land and says, believe in me, they will believe in him. So he will say, oh sky, bring down your rain. And the sky will rain, and growth will occur, vegetation. And he'll come across a people and they will say to them, oh people, believe in me, and they will disbelieve in him. So he'll say, your land become desert, and the land will become desert. And likewise, when he comes by land, the gold and the silver and the treasures of that land will come out behind him, like bees, flying, worker bees. And likewise, he will come to a Bedouin and say to him, would you believe in me if I bring your father and mother alive? And he'll say, yes. And he said, point me to their graves. So point him to their graves. And he'll say, come out. And two jinns will go in and come out and appear, and then they'll say, I believe in you. And from his fitna, the Prophet ﷺ said that there will be two angels accompanying him, resembling two prophets. And so when Dajjal comes to people and saying, I am Allah, one of the angels will say, you have lied. The other angel will say, concerning the angel who said you lied, this angel has spoken truth. Say, you spoke truth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow the people to hear that angel who says you lied to what he says. And so therefore the people will hear one of the angels say you spoke truth. So they'll think, because these angels will appear in the form of two prophets, they'll think that one of these prophets of Allah is now confessing and testifying that the Dajjal is truly Allah. Most of his followers will be Jews, and also people who do not speak Arabic, and also women, and also Bedouins. Somebody might ask, why would non-Arabs, why would women, why would Bedouins follow him? Because usually when people do not know Arabic, they don't have enough religious knowledge. Usually women, we don't spend enough time teaching our sisters, so there's a lack of religious knowledge. And with Bedouins, likewise, because they are Bedouins not living in the cities, typically they do not have enough religious knowledge. And so these will be his followers. So much so that women will come out and follow him, that a man will go into his household and tie his wife, tie her, and his mother, and his daughter, and his sister, and his aunt, because he will be afraid that she will go out and follow him. And yet the Prophet ﷺ told us that we will fight him, and we will defeat him. And when a Dajjal with his army of Jews come to Palestine to fight the Muslims will gather in Damascus. This will be the center of the Muslims, their seat of power. And at the time of Fajr, they will prepare themselves to fight a Dajjal. This person who claimed that he was Allah. And so the Muslims will be lining up for Salat al-Fajr, because after Salat al-Fajr, they were going to open the gates and fight them. And as they are lining up for prayer, at the white minaret in Damascus, Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus the son of Mary, alayhi salam, will come down. An angel on both of his sides, and his hands upon the shoulder of these two angels. And he will come down. The Prophet ﷺ even describes to us his garments, that he'll be wearing yellow garments. And that from his head, his sweat will be dropping like, the beads of his sweat like pearls. And when he comes in Damascus, the Muslims of course are standing for prayer. They will say, "O Prophet of Allah, lead us in prayer." And he'll say, "No, your Imam is from you." So the Muslims will pray, And then they will open up the gates to go out to battle. And Isa ibn Maryam will kill the Dajjal. Will kill the Dajjal at the gates of Lud, which is a city in Israel now. And when he kills a Dajjal with his lance, he will raise it and show the blood of a Dajjal to the Muslims. And when he kills their king, the Jews will scatter. There will be disarray in their army. There will be confusion. There will be fear. So they will begin to flee and hide. The Jews will hide behind rock and tree. The Prophet ﷺ said, on that day, rock and tree will speak and will say, "O Abdullah, O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." And when the battle is over, Isa ibn Maryam will rule this ummah by Allah's scripture and by the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, it is near that Isa ibn Maryam will come down amongst you as a just ruler. He will break the cross, exterminate the pig, and he will drop the jizya. He will break the cross, means put an end to Christianity, because Christians will no longer have an excuse to believe that he's the son of God. Ta'ala Allah an dhalika 'uluwan kabira, once they see Isa ibn Maryam. And likewise, he will exterminate the pig, that animal which they made halal for themselves. And he will drop the jizya. In other words, in his time, either Islam or death. There will be no exceptions. However, though, before he is able to rule, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause a great turmoil to occur. And that is the letting loose of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog, as it is said in English. And these are two tribes of human beings who will come from the east. And they will come racing towards the Middle East. They come from the far east, coming racing towards the Middle East, killing whoever they come across. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal to Isa and Maryam that I am sending forth these people. No one can stand in front of them. So Isa and the believers with him will be forced to retreat and hide in the mountains of Sinai. To hide in the mountains of Sinai. And the Prophet ﷺ said the believers that day will be hiding in caves and in mountains and in the cities. Because whoever they come across, they will kill. Until when they reach Palestine, they will come across the lake of Tiberias. When the last of them comes, they will find that the lake has been drunk, all of it. Because their numbers are so many. And they will have thought that they had killed everybody on the earth. So they will say, we have killed all those on earth, now let us kill all those in heaven. So they will shoot their arrows to the sky above, and their arrows will return back with blood. So they will think they killed Allah and the angels. This is how Allah deceives them. And so Isa ibn Maryam and the believers who are held up in these mountains in Sinai, Isa will pray to Allah that Allah destroys these two tribes of human beings, because no army can face them. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send a bird which will drop some sort of worm-like thing in their necks, and they will all die in one night. But the earth will be filled with their bodies, the stench of their decaying and decomposing bodies. And so that you could not even breathe because of that. So Isa ibn Maryam will pray to Allah again. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send down a rain which will clean the earth. Clean the earth from their bodies. Now, at that time, when human beings come back out and Isa is a ruler, this is when peace will occur on earth. This is when there will be no more war. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that during that time, human beings will prefer a single prostration to Allah than all that is worth in the world and what can be found in there. And so there you will find Allah's blessings come in full. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause a single pomegranate to feed a family. Now you know this rumman, this fruit, right? About the size of a grapefruit, for those of you who haven't seen it. Usually, a single person can eat that, but it will suffice a family. A goat will suffice a tribe. A child, the Prophet ﷺ said, will play with the snake and the snake will not bite the child. And likewise, a lion will sit down and watch over sheep. Because the blessings of the earth will come out. You see, because whenever there is sinfulness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reduces the blessings. So, fruits do not appear as plentiful, rain does not appear as plentiful, money is not as useful, time is not as useful. That's why now we find, even though we have many things in our possession, we don't find benefit in it. I mean, you can't find any benefit in your time. You can't find any benefit in your money. Why? Because there's much sinfulness. And so there's a lack of barakah, blessings in these matters. But in the end of time, when people prefer a single sajda for the whole world and what's in it, then the blessings of the earth will come forward. And this is what the Christians are awaiting. And this is what their prophecies in Isaiah point to. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ has confirmed in his hadith. Now, Isa ibn Maryam will rule the people and will die. And it is said that he will be buried between the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. Because if you look in Medina, you find the Prophet ﷺ's grave, then you find a gap, and you find then the grave of Abu Bakr and Umar. And so it is said that he will be buried between the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, alayhi salam. And of course, after his death, there will be other Muslim rulers, until finally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees that a wind will come which will take the soul of every believer on the face of the earth, even if that faith he has is as little as a mustard seed. And then only unbelievers will be on the earth and Allah will establish the judgment. Some things that we need to understand. First of all, the signs of the Day of Judgment are matters of the unseen. We should not delve into them by our own reasoning. You find some people now saying that, well, a Dajjal, since he's one-eyed, it refers to capitalism and materialism because they're blind about the spiritual realities of life. Or they say that it's television, that's the one eye. Or you find some people who say that, for instance, that concerning these signs of the hour, that it refers to, like, for instance, I remember during the Gulf War, we had one person who stood up and he, and unfortunately I think he had this khutbah and they had the television cameras there because it was just the day right after the bombing occurred, the start of the Gulf War. So the cameras were there to see what the Muslims were going to say. And so he applied all these hadith regarding the fighting of the Christians and so forth to the Gulf War. In his ignorance, he took one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which says that the Day of Judgment will not occur until the necks of the camels of Busra will be lightened. The necks of the camels of Busra will be lightened. And Busra is a city in Syria, south of Damascus. And the event, according to most scholars like An-Nawawi and Ibn Taymiyyah, has already occurred. That there was a volcano which occurred in Arabia in the 7th century. And the light of the volcano was so great that it filled the light of the horizon and the sky. So much that in the nighttime, the camels of Busra, you could see the back of their necks and so forth. And likewise, even at that time, scholars wrote books and so forth, like Abu Sham and other scholars. Anyway, in his ignorance, he took the word Busra, and he mispronounced it to Basra, which is a city in Iraq. And he said, I saw last night on CNN. I saw the cruise missiles hitting there, and I saw the lights of the camels of Basra alighting. Look how the ignorance, can occur. So the point is that when it comes to these signs of the hour, we should seek this knowledge. It's very important for us, but we shouldn't delve into it out of our desires and so forth. We should believe as what the Prophet ﷺ said. And with these signs of the hour, we cannot really tell if this event refers to that sign until that event is over and until it becomes apparent if this is what it refers to. And that's why many times you find people misinterpreting events with regarding the signs of the hour.